Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good. Welcome here for another session of Dollars and Cents. First, I'm going to ask Wanda Draper, who's director of the museum, to come and welcome all of you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. We're very happy to have Dollars and Cents here with us again, and we really hope you will enjoy your day. We also hope you'll have time to see our brand new exhibit, Romare Bearden, a visionary artist. And the unique thing about this exhibit is you will never see this exhibit anywhere else in the world. And the reason is because it's not a traveling exhibit. It's an exhibit that we curated, and a part of the exhibit comes from the Romare Bearden family, and 50 pieces of it come from collectors right here in Maryland. So this exhibit will be open until March, and when it closes, all of those 50 pieces will go back to the individual owners, so they will not be available for the public to see. And the family's collection will go back to the Romare Bearden Foundation. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We also have on the third floor our permanent collection, which is 400 years of Maryland African American history. So while we hope you enjoy your day with Dollars and Cents, we also hope that you will enjoy the museum, become a member and become a part of our family, and shop in our museum shop, and just have a wonderful day, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Wanda. Appreciate it. Now I'm going to ask Eric from BB&T to come forward.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Eric Thompson. I'm the Vice President, Regional Sales and Service Leader for BB&T Bank Maryland Region, and I would like to welcome everyone to our third Dollars and Cents workshop. Let's give that a round of applause. I would first like to thank Operation Winning Life and Meridian Management Group for giving us, BB&T, the opportunity to partner with such a profound workshop. At BB&T, we enjoy working with innovative programs that support local communities and provide economic development to underserved markets. We are committed to helping businesses in the Maryland region achieve economic success and financial security. Great workshops like this help equip entrepreneurs with the tools and resources they need to be successful in a challenging economy. We at BB&T are committed to helping you guys be successful and making sure that you have every tool and resources to achieve your financial goals. Just in the last 3 years, we've opened branches in communities where families and businesses have to go outside of their community just to do their banking. But now we can be those resources. We would love the opportunity to get to know you and get to know your business as well. Thank you again.
Thank you, Eric. And what I will do now, I'm going to just kind of give you an overview of really what the day is going to look like. And it's an exciting day. And this is really the third dollar and cents workshop. We are very excited about it. And we're looking forward to hearing from all of the speakers this morning, because it's very, very valuable information that you'll receive, and the equity aspects of it. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what has taken place with the two previous ones. On the 7th in December, we really formed a workshop looking at dollars and cents, and it was really dealing with financing, maximize your business profits for wealth creation. Its focus really was on cash flow, if you will, and the topics included maximizing profits while performing government and private contracts. You know, contracts, particularly government contracts and private contracts, are very prevalent in this area. We do a lot of it, contract financing, and it's a great way, by the way, of really starting a business and also growing a business. We've had the opportunity to birth a number of businesses in this area, and really several of them have actually grown to actually go public. And so it has that kind of potential in this area. So that was a very successful workshop, and so you can see the kind of activities and kind of topics that we covered. The second workshop, in dollars and cents, really focused on growth-centered financing. What should your business look like to attract growth capital? Once you start, if you will, and you're growing your business, then you need another kind of financing. And so the second workshop focused on growth financing, term debt, refinancing, restructuring, existing debt, various ways you could really obtain growth financing. And the presenters discussed what the business expansion process looks like, not only in terms of attracting financing, but also in terms of your management structure. We've seen a lot of people grow right out of business because they didn't have the necessary human capital around them, and they outgrow their financial capital, so they wound up growing right out of businesses. The various methods of growth applicable to businesses, such as organic growth, growth through acquisitions, geographic expansion, and the internal infrastructure, which I just spoke about, is very important. And what is the transition of the financing? And we call that really the tenor of the financing. It not only fits where the company is, but also it fits the kind of financing that the company needs at that particular point. And so we kind of specializes in that because if companies come to us, they will have challenges, or they're growing, or they're beginning, and we look at structuring the financing that fits the situation. And so we feel that that's very important. Today's workshop will be the third one, and is entitled Dollars and Cents Equity Financing. Equity financing. Matter of fact, last week, I think, we was part of the Black Caucus workshop. We did a workshop down there last week, focusing on equity on capital. How does companies position themselves for equity capital? So this will focus on the various types of subordinated debt and equity financing tools that are used, what this means for your company, and how to prepare for investments. And that's very important. And when you're looking for equity, you're looking for other people's money, and you want these other people to invest in your company, and you want to convince them that, one, you have the experience, the talent, and expertise, and you have the infrastructure where they're willing to invest their money in your company. And obviously, they're looking for an upside, if you will. And that's where what we call the alignment of interests is very, very important in any kind of financing. But in equity financing, that alignment of interest is even more important, because the person that's investing equity in your company, they actually wind up owning part of your company, okay? And so just not you as the entrepreneur making all of the decisions, okay? So you have a true partner when you're talking about trying to obtain equity for your company. So we'll talk about the various types, what does it mean for your company, and how to prepare, again, for such investments. The presenters today will include Lou Hutt, Senior, President of Hutt & Company. Mr. Hutt is a CPA and attorney. Since its beginning in 1982, the focus at the Hutt Company has been the provision for a wide range of accounting and management and advisory and training services. And Lou and MMG goes way back. We worked for a number of years together doing some of these things. Matter of fact, he really stretched out on us because he's a true entrepreneur. We were doing some training years ago, and he turned it into a book. And actually, what edition is it now, Lou?
Third edition.
In the third edition, based on from working with him. Now, the interesting thing is, since we were a part of that, I don't know how much revenue he's generating and why we didn't happen to get a part of that revenue, Anthony. We should have talked about equity on that, Randy. But Lou's done a great job. You got that. And then Steve Anderson, the Vice President of Small Business Lending, will come and share with you from BB&T. And there'll be 3 local entrepreneurs that MMG has assisted over the years, different kind of industries and very different markets that these folks are in. Really interesting businesses is why we actually made equity investments for us. And then we'll close out with Anthony Williams, Senior Vice President for Meridian Management Group, who will talk about the various products that we serve and that we provide, And we have various products where we can birth a company, and we've developed a strategy, what we call a continuum of financing products, where we literally birth a company, and we stay with that company through all their growth cycles. Hopefully they are growth cycles. Not all the time they are growth cycles, but mostly they're growth cycles, and we could stay with them without financing all the way through going public, and we've done that several times. And we try to bring in other investors as well. And matter of fact, you have a story from Willie Vereen, how we worked with him and how we worked with him with BB&T and where he started and really where he is now. It's really a great story. Okay? So that's kind of what the presenters will look like. And I think, Lou, you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. Let's give a hand to Mr. Hutt.
As a coach of mine used to say, great day to be alive. Now, it really is, truly is. And I always get extremely excited when I have the opportunity to present on behalf of MMG Ventures. Most of you probably know that not only locally, regionally, but nationally, MMG Venture has really been the flagship and the thought leader when it comes to creating supportive financing programs for small business. Likewise, it's an honor to be part of a team with BB&T Bank, which I consider one of the most progressive and frankly supportive financial institutions in our area. It just happened to be my bank too. This is an important topic. I can't think of a more important topic for entrepreneurs than really discussing the art of attracting, quote unquote, other people's money. Believe it or not, Stanley and I didn't even talk about the concept, but we're on the same page because it is almost like if you could imagine a child with abundant potential reaching their fullest potential. The question is, what do we do to nurture that potential? How do we get that young person or that young business to the point of fulfillment? One of the most pivotal questions that we have to answer as business leaders is how to finance the growth, how to finance the development. You know, years ago, people sort of threw caution to the wind. They would simply say, I need X number of dollars. I don't care where it comes from, how I get it, I just need the money. If I can get the money, I can do what I need to do. I can run this business. We can win, we can grow. And as Stanley said, what we then discovered, many of us that were first-generation business owners, that there's some strings attached. Sure, if we go debt, there's some strings attached. If we go equity, there's some strings attached. In the final analysis, if we could do it without financing at all, that's the best approach. But the reality is, to fulfill that potential, just like we often tell young people, you need to go to college. You got to make the investment. We have to take some steps to create and, frankly, to position us to reach that fulfillment. Now, as Stan says, and I give it to Stanley Tucker, MMG, and BB&T for supporting this program, because it really, in my opinion, addresses all the key parts of the continuum. Debt. Well, the beautiful thing about debt, frankly, is that it's a clean transaction. It is a clean transaction. Stanley said a minute ago, when you go to equity, you're signing on to a partner. In debt, it's a quasi-partnership. Really is a quasi-partnership when you think about it. Sure, the institution who you obtain debt financing is going to be around to support you, make sure that hopefully they can provide a little bit of business advice along the way. They help to assess the type of credit facility that matches your need, whether you need a term loan or whether you need a line of credit. You know, just like a good teacher, they look back at your transcript and they try to suggest how you might proceed forward, what would be the best way to structure the transaction. So they're very helpful. But they don't live with you every day. An equity partner lives with you every day. It's a marriage. It's not a quasi-marriage. It's not dating, right? It's a true marriage. And we know that whenever you make such an important decision in your life, we need to think about short-term and long-term consequences. So that's really what I want to talk to you about. And this time, particularly equity investment. Before I came, Anthony was teasing me and said, Lou, he said, your PowerPoints are getting shorter and shorter. I said, because it doesn't take a lot of words to get across the point. It really doesn't. We've got to focus on a few key components of this decision. Because as I say, it's a marriage, and in a marriage, it's a two-way street. Agree? It's got to work for your partner. It's got to work for you. And frankly, when we start talking about equity, your partner is looking really for the potential value of this investment. See, because unlike, say, a financial institution that's lending debt and may have collateral just in case things don't work out, the equity investor is all in. As a matter of fact, collateral is not necessarily a big issue for them. They're making their bet on you based on the strength of your operating engine. What's the potential of this business to be successful? And ultimately, what's the potential that this business has to repay my investment, plus give me a premium? Notice the lender's a little more defined. Sort of the lender says, listen, I'm going to hedge my bets. We'll lend you X number of dollars. And by the way, if this doesn't work out, I'd like to see some level of collateral so that I don't lose my shirt. That's their business model. The equity investor has a slightly different business model. They're more risk-oriented. They say, listen, we're not even talking about collateral. The first thing we want to understand is, what's your business model? What's your value proposition? Give me a little piece about your history. Tell me about your present situation. And most importantly, spell out, lay out, help me visualize your future. Yes, the equity investor has a different mindset. Now, they've got an agenda, and of course, we have an agenda. So the key is that we got to keep a scorecard. And on that scorecard, for us to have a match, I need to be able to see a lot of A's and B's on my scorecard, and presumably, they need to see a lot of A's and B's on their scorecard. Oh, yeah. We got to evaluate the quality of the relationship. It's got to be a two-way street. It's got to work for them, and it's got to work for us. Equity investors. For the most part, particularly in terms of private equity firms, we can talk about angels, but these folks are looking for a diversified portfolio. So you may be in IT, they may have another investment in energy, they may have another investment in retail, but they're looking to diversify their portfolio, their holdings. So the question is, do you present something that's unique, that's promising, and that is consistent with the kind of investments they're interested in? Yeah, that's one item. Diversify. From your standpoint, from my standpoint as a business owner, I may be interested in a little diversification too. Because some of the initiatives that I'm considering may be better financed with equity than debt. Oh yeah, we both have similar interests. See, from a business person's standpoint, there may be certain aspects of our business that could bloom, but they may take a long time to bloom. You know, I met with, for example, a couple of weeks ago, with one of my clients that's a government contracting firm. They're 8A certified. New. My first question is, hey, Stanley, where are you? Where are you? Stan's outside. What's your end game? Stan always says that. What is your end game? There you are. Right? You only got 8 years. How are you going to leverage this technology or this work that you're doing with the government into something that's long-lasting? See, I need to know that. That's the type of question that an equity investor wants to know. Now, take it slightly different. A financial institution, a lender, may simply say, how long is the contract? What do you anticipate your profit's going to be on the contract? And is there enough profit and cash flow involved, monthly, quarterly, to repay the debt plus the interest? Sort of a different angle, if you know what I'm saying. I'm like a preacher now. Y'all with me? All right, thank you. Give me an amen or something. All right, now you're loosening up. Feel like we got a connection. So yeah, we're sort of balancing things as we begin to assess our relationship. The equity investor is looking for a compelling value proposition. See, like the question I asked to the client, they're just saying, so, okay, you got this one deal with Department of Labor. Where do you go from here? That one deal may yield $1.5 million in profit. Where do you go from here? Because if I invest $750,000, guess what? I want at least $1 million coming back. Equity investors want 30 to 40% return on their investment. Now, I was laughing the other day when somebody interviewed Steve Ballmer, who used to be the CEO of Microsoft. And as most of you know, he went and bought the LA Clippers basketball team for $2 billion. When he did that 3 or 4 years ago, I was like, $2 billion for an NBA team like the Clippers? You kidding me? Then they interviewed me and said, well, listen, you've been in the game for a while now. And we know you paid $2 billion. How much would you sell it for today? He said, well, it would have to be north of $4 billion. Here it is, in 4 or 5 years, now his expectation has been realized. He's got, what is it? Calculate that for me, 100% return on investment. So what I'm saying to you is, while equity investors are not quite as rigid, they're not quite as demanding in terms of collateral, the expectation in terms of a return tends to be higher. Sure. It's an interesting concept. Something else that equity investors are very interested in: the strength of your management team. Remember, for the most part, equity investors are not as concerned about hard collateral. They're not as concerned about, well, do you have a CD? Do you have equity in your home? Do you have mutual funds that approximate the amount of this loan that you're requesting? No. Equity investors are interested in other things that in their book equate to collateral and equate to a reasonable expectation that you'll realize your dreams. The strength of your management team is key. Now, I liken this to building a house. If you know exactly what the blueprint is before you start, you can do a better job of completing the construction. So that's why we're spending a little time talking about what this thing should look like when we're done. See, because if we know when we talk to particularly folks that are looking at hundreds and perhaps thousands of proposals, what you put on the first table is critical because you may not get another shot. And I'm telling you here and now, the strength of management is one of the key considerations. Do you have the juice to get it done? Sure. So, growth, value proposition. What's the value proposition? Is it more than more than a return that I would get if I just put my money safely in a certificate of deposit at a bank, where I could go to sleep at night and never have to scratch my head or toss and turn and worry about whether or not this is going to actually happen? If I'm going to toss and turn and lose a little bit of sleep, I want a premium on my investment. Let's understand the mindset. Again, with an equity investor, they're not necessarily talking about collateral. They're not necessarily talking about your background. But they do want to know that you have the juice to get things done. Sure, from the standpoint of diversification, they want to know, what kind of traction you got in the marketplace. How do you know that folks are going to get excited about what it is you're selling? Help me understand how you've concluded that you can be an all-star. So again, if I'm putting together my blueprint, those are things that I want to be, if not reduced to writing, I want to be prepared to address, right? Because every entrepreneur has a dream, right? But what's different about your dream? Motivation. One of the critical things for equity investors, folks who want to get 30 to 40% return on their investment, folks that want to, frankly, put in $100,000 and get back $150,000. Oh, and I didn't tell you about the time frame. They usually want to get it back between 3 and 7 years. So the equity investor is patient, but not, how would I say this? Not willing to go forever without getting their money. See, equity investors want liquidity within 3 to 7 years. Again, if I'm putting together the blueprint to make the pitch to someone that's going to put equity in my business, I need to understand that mindset. That's their agenda. You can come and tell me, oh, well, probably, maybe 15 years, I'm thinking that overall the world economy is going to shift and things and trends and probably in 10 years or 15, well, you're starting to turn me off as an equity investor because my play is probably 4 to 7 years. So as Stanley said, a lot is involved really in preparing to talk to these folks. Now, your motivation, of course your motivation is, again, as MMG Ventures always talks about, is access to capital. That's your motivation. But you want it on the right terms and the right conditions. Now, you don't have to be a guru in that regard. I'm a chemist. I'm in medicine. My background is in retail. You're taking me into some areas that, frankly, I'm not as confident. I don't have as much experience. That's why you surround yourself with a team. Oh, yeah, you get a lawyer. You lawyer up, folks. And I know it scares you, but like, man, I got to spend, yeah. Your CPA up, folks. Because that gives credibility. Remember, the equity investor as well as the financial lender wants to know and be assured that you had the juice to get it done. I'd be horrible if y'all put me in an IT firm and said, hey, Lou, handle the engineering department. I'd be like, you in trouble. You are in trouble. I'm a pretty bright guy, but that's not my thing, right? Same thing with you. You in one field, other field, whatever. And say, have you thought about the tax implications of this business proposition? And you say, well, no, I really haven't. Do you have anybody that can help you walk through it? Well, I was pushing that decision off until later. That's a bad mark. That's a C. That's a D on the scorecard. Yeah. I just love talking about this. One of the other things that equity investors look for is they look for a business that is scalable. That's the key word. Again, Anthony, I don't need a lot of words. Scalable. So growth in proportion, but on a profitable basis. So at a certain point, every widget brings about 25 cents down to the bottom line. Every dollar sale of an additional widget means about 25 cents down to the bottom line. So does this business concept have growth potential? And can it be expanded in a manner that's profitable, such that the return that I'm expecting to yield will happen? And in essence, really what the angel investor, what the private equity investor, what the venture capitalist, what they're saying is, convince me, show me, and matter of fact, quantify the proposition. You say, well, what do you mean? I mean, I got different customers, I got different clients, I'm profiling different folks, and the prices will be between X and Y, and I just know I can grow my business by 20 or 30%. And they said, well, can you put it down on paper? Can you put me together a simple spreadsheet so that I can see how this looks like, what it looks like in numbers? Yes. Equity investors would like to think you're going to have a large market position. Yeah, they're looking for the next Facebook. Now, I don't mean that to that extent or to that scale, but do you understand the concept? They're looking for you to be a hit in your industry. They're looking for you to put together a combination of ingredients that are going to make your deal very special. I mentioned earlier that they're looking for a high rate of return. You know, it used to always amaze me because sometimes, and I understand, most of us are first-generation businesses. We didn't talk about this stuff at the dinner table. We didn't have a lot of uncles or aunts who were in business. When we went to school, most of us were more concerned about getting a good job than we were creating jobs. So I understand it. I understand it. But the reality is now we have to sort of take our game to the next level. We have to understand that this whole idea of receiving money and just getting back 3% or 4% on that money is unrealistic. In other words, I have clients that will come in and they say, well, what I want to do, Lou, do you happen to know somebody that would loan me like $40,000 for 30 days and I would pay him like 2 or 3%? And I say, as nicely as I can, because I do treat clients nicely, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't know how many people I could interest on that basis. Because the bottom line is, if I could get that return on a certificate of deposit and I have to lose any sleep and I have to be worried, why wouldn't I do? I mean, I don't like you that much, Anthony. I'm picking on Anthony because Stanley's the man. I can't pick on him. He's the CEO. But I'm saying, come on. Why would I do that? I mean, frankly, if you just want to pay an interest rate back, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, because banks make money, because they do this business in aggregate. But if you simply want to pay an interest rate back on money and pay it back in a certain period of time, go get debt financing. But if you're talking to me about my money being in your business for an extended period of time with no defined repayment plan, with not much collateral, if any, the deal that you're offering me must be extremely attractive. We're just being real here. We're just being real. So, from your standpoint, what are you looking at? Motivation. Well, some people say, hey, Lou, I am just looking for somebody, anybody, to give me the money I need. So that's an angel investor. That's somebody that says, hey, listen, I've got $300,000, I got $500,000 that I'm willing to put out there. All I want is a return on my money. And you're wondering to yourself, finally, a dream come true. Maybe that's not a dream come true. Why? Because that individual is solely interested in wealth. They're not interested in helping you. They're not interested in opening any doors for you. They don't even want to come to a meeting. All I want at the end of the day is the return on my investment. If you're first time coming out of the blocks, I'm going to probably advise you that that's not a good relationship. Joe, you say, look, what do you mean? You're talking about passing up money? What about the other situation where the folk, let's say they have money, but they want a lion's share of your company? Stanley alluded to that. He said, you know what? I got the $500,000 that you need. Y'all see Shark Tank, right? But I want 80% of your company. Oh, no, I can help you too. But that's the deal. I'm going to probably say to you, That's not the right deal. Then all of a sudden, Prince or Princess Charming comes in the room. He said, Lou, why is it you see so much beauty in this particular equity investor? Because number one, they got a passion for your industry. Number two, they have connections that can open doors for you. And number three, they've got money. That's your motivation. See what I said from the beginning? This is a scorecard. The equity investor, the prospective equity player, has an agenda. But you too have an agenda. I'm not just looking for the first person that can come by here with a check, but I'm looking for a player who is willing to contribute, who has a passion for what I'm doing, who is willing to lend their credibility to open doors for me. That's the ideal equity partner. That's a Lewisism. Operation. Keep in mind that when it comes to the operation of your business, equity investors generally want to have some degree of participation. They want to have some level of say-so. Because if you get off the beaten track, they want to be in a position to nudge you back to Main Street, to get you back over in the center lane. Because remember, the ideal partner has a passion for your industry, has connections, and has money. So will they want to be part of management? Not necessarily. But would they want to be part of the governing board? Probably. So again, not necessarily interested in being part of the day-to-day operations, but certainly want to be included in quarterly meetings that are designed to review your progress. Now, in contrast, your financial institution, your bank, may say, hey, listen, make your payments monthly, send us a financial statement periodically, and if you need anything else, give us a call. Now, BB&T is a little more involved. BB&T is going to call you periodically and say, is there anything else you need, Lou? That's why I love them, right? But I'm saying, generally speaking, lenders are not as involved after the transaction is consummated. Equity folks generally want some degree of participation in the governance of the business. I would too. I gave you $500,000. I want to be involved. And I can see y'all shaking your head. You want to be involved? It was your money. You know, I mean, what's involvement there? It's periodically, let's look at the financial statements. Periodically, let's look at your performance metrics or your sales at where you expected them to be. Have you hired as many people as you thought? Is their level of capability? Is the mix what you need it to be? See, those kind of partners can help you. Where are we vulnerable as entrepreneurs? You know where we're vulnerable? Now, I'm going to say it real quietly because it can be offensive. We're vulnerable because we're loyal to people who were with us when we first started. We're vulnerable because they may not have the skill set we need to take the business to the next level. That's hard. So sometimes we've got to own up to that. We've got to be humane in terms of how we facilitate the change, but that's what leaders do. Leaders make hard, tough decisions. Sometimes you need the digital strategist. It can't be your cousin Thomas who learned it on his own. Bless his heart. He can't get you to where you need to be. So operations, that's what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, one other thing before I leave operations. The other thing that both a lender and an equity investor will want to ensure is regulatory compliance. See, because we can have the best business model in the world, but if you mess up with the IRS, them doggone payroll taxes, right? Or if you mess up with your licensing board, all the profits that we make go down the drain. Not to mention, in some businesses, just a citation has significant reputational harm that depletes the goodwill of the business. So regulatory compliance is important. Now, information. The most important thing to remember about information is this, that when we're really in the trenches, it's not what you tell me, it's what I see. See, as a matter of fact, most, and I happen to be on a couple of boards. One is a mutual fund. And I said, well, really, we don't have to have a long meeting. But what I need to see is the information. I need to see what is our standing compared to peers in this area of investment. What's the return on investment? So what I'm saying to you is when we have these periodic meetings, folks want to see financial stuff. Oh yeah, they want to see your balance sheet. They want to see the income statement. Steve Anderson is going to talk to you a little bit about what he wants to see at BB&T Bank. But these things are important. So while that might bore you stiff, you understand that that's the calling card. It is as important for you to make the investment in strong, reliable information systems as it is for you to make an investment in a computer. Somebody say, well, I need more space. I need more facilities. You also need the capability to generate financial information. Information. Performance metrics. How do you measure how your business is progressing? Think of it as a report card, ladies and gentlemen. Information. How am I doing on time? Good. I'm going to pause in a few minutes and let y'all ask me a few questions. Legal and corporate documents. Information. Legal and corporate documents may bore you stiff. But if you're going to get in the equity arena, get used to it. You got to acquire a taste. Like some folks say, I used to didn't like vegetables, but I acquired a taste. Doctor said, if you don't, right? You'd be like, give me some of them greens. Got any more? Right? But get used to it. This whole thing of informality, it only goes so far. You know, this whole idea of, I used to have clients that said, well, now, John is your employee and Sue is your independent contractor? Yes. I said, now, they do the same work. Yes. There's a legal criteria for determining whether someone should be classified as an employee versus an independent contractor. Oh, and by the way, do we have an employment agreement? Oh, no, they just been with the company a long time, forever. We don't have any kind of understanding that we reduced to writing? Oh, and so-and-so, by the way, you know, we do deals all the time. That accounts for about 20% of my revenue. Really? So you have some kind of working relationship, an agreement that covers this working relationship, like a joint venture agreement, a contractual agreement? Oh, no, we just, listen, handshake. Doesn't work, folks. Oh, I've got a corporation. I got a board. Well, we don't keep minutes. You don't keep minutes? See, there's an expectation here. When you're taking your game to the level where you're approaching someone for $500,000, $1 million, $5 million, $10 million worth of equity investment, you got to be prepared to bring that game up. And it's not a problem to say, hey, I haven't done much of that in the past, but I just hired Lou Hutton. He's going to help me put together the legal documents. Sorry about that. Stanley, I didn't mean to say that. Right? But I'm serious. It's not really that but it's at least having in your mind the idea that this is where we need to go. No one's perfect. No single business, including yours truly, is perfect on all of these levels. But we at least have to have in our mind and in our sight the vision of what it means to get there. Yes, information. Expectations. I've commented a little bit about this through the course of my remarks, but some of the ideas need to be revisited. Expectations. As compared to a lender, equity investors expect more communication. Now, whether you want to call this a biweekly update or a biweekly conference call, however you want to couch it, usually folks that put money in with no guarantee that the money is going to be paid back want to keep apprised of what's going on. So let's prepare ourselves mentally. As Stanley said, these are partners. This is a relationship, a close relationship. And y'all like me that have been married 40 years, you know you can't just disappear for 2 weeks and then show up. You'll be like, damn, what happened to this lock? Right? So you got to stay in contact. I used to tease my wife. She used to always say, well, listen, if you're going to be a little late, that's all right. Just give me a call. After about 10 years, I said, okay, I'll call him. Right? Because I understood. I learned, hey, you got to communicate. You got to stay in touch. See, and I'm using some basic examples, but what I'm simply saying to you is that some of the preparation for attracting other people's money is common sense. It's common sense. You just turn the tables and you say, if I were on that side, what would I expect? See? So, expectation. I mentioned governance. How you govern the operation, how you make significant policy decisions. For example, whether you extend a simplified employee pension or a 401k to the employees. governing folk usually want to be a part of that because that can have a significant impact on the bottom line. Not that you won't do it, because the justification for something like that may be in order to attract the talent that we need and to retain that talent, we've got to offer this level of benefits. You know, I was just reading the article today in the Wall Street Journal as it relates to Amazon. One of the key determinants of them selecting Long Island and Northern Virginia is access to talent. Oh yeah, they want to be near the international airports and all of that. Talent. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, governance and working relationships, I mentioned regulatory compliance. There is an expectation that you will have a system of internal controls in place. You say, look, what do you mean by internal controls? Checks and balances. I mean, you know, once you get more than about 4 or 5 people, people have to have sort of defined areas of responsibility, and authority somehow has to be limited. Everybody can't go in and have the authority to write a check. That's vulnerability. So we've got to evolve. And I'm not saying that this is something you ought to feel to yourself like, man, I am really deficient. I have no idea how to approach that. This is why you have a professional team, because they help you to establish these things, okay? But you need checks and balances. The last and most important thing under this category of expectation is this: equity players expect you to have a well-defined exit plan. Again, borrow Stanley's term. What's the end game here? You know, are we ultimately, when you grow this to a point where, you know, you are considered a potential leader in the industry, that we pitch to potential firms that want to merge, or potential firms that may want to acquire our business, or that what's the exit strategy here? I mean, do we try to issue an IPO? Do we try to go public? Where does this ultimately lead? And sometimes the reason that they're asking this is not only to get their money out of it, but decide if they want to keep their money in it, right? Exit plan is a very critical part of their expectation. And then on your side, what is your expectation? You could say to yourself, hey, my expectation is this. I want a player who understands that 7 years from now, I want my 20% back. That's okay. You know what I'm saying? This is a prenup. And I appreciate it, I love it, and we're going to have a great time for 7 years. But after that, I want the option to be able to acquire my 20, I want my keys back. Oh, you hard. Yeah, I am. But I tell you, you're going to have a good time for 7 years. You'll make plenty of money. You'll enjoy the ride. Because let's face it, when you make this kind of commitment, you're opening up your house. You're moving somebody in. And you ought to be very selective, very careful. Let me take a moment. Any questions? Yes, Tim. Yes, sir. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful question. Wonderful question. Tim, Tim is touching on something that is very important and dear to me. Many times I talk to small companies, and even my clients, and they will say, well, what does the bank need? What does MMG need? And I said, no. That's not the question. The question is, what do you need? See, because the biggest investor of all is you. It's your reputation. It's your money. It's your time. Could be your family, because the family is making a sacrifice. So the question that Tim raises is that you need information. In other words, I want to know, and let's face it, what I always say to entrepreneurs, there's a difference between cash flow and profit. Right, Stanley?
Yes, sir.
Big difference. See, cash flow is, I started off and I didn't have any customers, but I kept putting in $10,000 a month. See, no sales, but I kept putting in, and I'm prepared to put in $10,000 a month for the next 24 months. That gives you cash flow, but no profit, right? In order for any business to be sustainable long-term, you got to generate profit. So at some point, I got to line them sales up with the expenses, and if the expenses are here, I got to keep pushing these sales till I get to a point of break even, and then hopefully I get the sales up here, and the expenses grow proportionately, but not in the same step. Now, Tim says, hey, you need that. Because I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes there's certain service lines or there's certain product lines that you will determine after about 12 or 18 months, this not working. And the only way you'll be able to do that, Tim, is you've got to have income statements that break out the different operations. So, great question. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Earlier you talked about the need to have appropriate experts, so you know, the accountant, the lawyer. I think in terms of getting equity financing, I think if you could just talk about, like the necessity's got to have, whether it's a board of advisors or a board of directors who have expertise in that industry and how attractive that is to potential investors.
There's another great perspective. Many small companies create a quasi-board of directors, and that is a board of advisors. Now, here's, again, a Lewisism. Pay your folks. Okay? Pay your folks to show up at a quarterly meeting and be part of a board of advisors. If you ask Stanley Tucker to participate, now, you can't do that, can't you, Stan? No, he can't do that usually. But I can't, no. But if you ask folks, frankly, who can bring a lot to the table, connections, understanding of the industry, understanding of business, financial astuteness, and I'm not talking about a lot of money. It could be $100 per meeting. But what that $100 indicates is that you value and appreciate their contribution. The difference, legally speaking, between the board of advisors and a board of directors is the board of advisors are fiduciaries, and theoretically, their decisions and their votes are binding on the company. With a board of advisors, their recommendations are simply that. They're recommendations and they're not binding resolutions. I got time for one more and I'm gonna sit down. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You brought to focus 3 different equity types of relationships. In my industry, there's like a 4.
Talk to me.
The quality of what you just mentioned. I also have the equity person that wants to learn from my industry as part of their equity position. For example, in real estate investment, we have individuals that say, we'll lend you the money, but could you show us how you're doing what you're doing?
Interesting.
So that's where I'm going with what you're talking about. I love everything you said.
Yes.
And I'm also looking at how I could build that better relationship with that fourth level equity position.
You know what I love about that is you're being creative. See, you're saying, how can I leverage what I know to attract capital? You know, the same thing you may do sometimes in terms of attracting talent. You say, I can't afford to pay you $300,000. But what I can afford to do is give you a 5 or 10% equity with a provision that I can buy that back. See, think about your agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a ball. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. If you ever need to reach me, here's my contact information.
Thank you, Lou. Before we take a break, when we MMG, we look at a deal. We looked at all the things that Lou discussed, including management. We've seen C managers screw up our A product. And we've seen A managers take an A product and really make it work. So I say that when I first came to the Maryland Small Business Development Financing Authority, where we first started, they had one person there, and she was just a secretary. But I came out of banking. And so I had to build a team. And I'm saying this to you as you build your team. Take your ego out of it, because the first person I hired was this young lady named Catherine Lockhart. The primary reason I hired her was she was 10 times smarter than me.
When you're looking for debt, right, your business is growing, right? So you really have two sources of financing options available to you. So in looking at that, so we have debt financing, right? So, and we have equity financing, so which Lou had discussed earlier. So debt financing really involve, sure, sorry, I apologize, can you hear me? All right. So debt financing involves borrowing money from a lender to be repaid plus interest, simplest terms, right? So, and how does this work? So a bank from a private lender or from a financial institution, a bank. So typically secured by collateral, sometimes unsecured, but normally we like to see collateral. So predetermined repayment structure, generally on a repayment, so monthly repayment over a period of time, 5, 7, 10 years. So fixed or variable interest rate. So, and once paid in full, there's no future obligations to a lender. So really simply put, so if you're seeking debt financing, it has to make sense to you. If you can make money, right, plus the money that you're borrowing, plus that interest, and you can make a return, debt financing makes sense, right? So equity financing involves, let me go to the next slide here. Equity financing involves raising money by selling interest in the shares of your company. So you're giving up a piece of your company. So as we had talked about earlier, kind of thinking about Shark Tank, right? So in really a simple form. So there is no repayment of a loan. Family, friends, investors providing money in exchange for ownership and control of your company. So talk a little bit about, again, the fundamentals when it comes to debt and equity financing, discussing a little bit about the pros and the cons. So in debt, really, there's no dilution of your company's shares. So the bank doesn't take ownership in your company, right? So we're a partner with your company, though. So we certainly want you to succeed. If you don't succeed, the debt doesn't get repaid, and that's a bad day for everybody, right? So we are a partner, and I will say as BB&T, we are a community bank. We do have a community banking model. So I can't speak for other commercial banks, but what I can speak for is myself and my colleagues. I'm very active in our business clients that we work with in their business and how they operate. I'm very interested to see how they work. It's not just about lending money, it's about a relationship. And that's what banking is, it is a relationship. So another debt financing pro is that the interest rate certainly can be tax deductible. And you can purchase new equipment, inventory, the stuff that you need to grow your business. So as a lender, we do rely on you to understand your business and understand your needs. Clearly defined purpose is what we look for when we're lending money. And that's something that's really important. If you understand your business, that makes the bank feel very comfortable when it comes to lending money, right? So some of the cons, regular repayment schedule, which can impact your cash flow. Your cash flow, especially in an early stage, so when a company is in a growth stage, that cash is very important. And that cash, if you are seeking debt and you do obtain a loan through a bank, you are going to deplete your cash both for the principal repayment, which we call current portion of long-term debt, and the interest expense. So both of that needs to be calculated and thought about when you're financing debt. Also, personal guarantees are frequently used in any form of debt obligation. So whether you're purchasing a vehicle for the business or you're purchasing real estate, personal guarantees are very important. The thought process behind that really is if you believe in the business, right, you will personally guarantee that note. So makes sense, right? So if you believe in your business, so if you don't believe in your business, why should we? So just being honest. So that's how it's looked at. So it's very important. Going on to the equity financing. So certainly there are many benefits to equity financing, specifically additional cash up front without having to repay a debt, right? So cash up front to grow your company. So money that you can put into the resources and the things that you need, whether it be building up management infrastructure, whether it be developing a new product, whatever that may be for your respective industry, there is no debt that's being repaid. So investors also are typically much more motivated to help you grow your company as they're rewarded for your profitability, right? So they're financially vested just like you are. So that's very, very attractive, that you have a business partner that is financially motivated and is a partner within the firm. So some of the cons, so you are diluting your shares. So versus debt, the bank is not taking any ownership within your company, right? So very straightforward. Oftentimes equity financing can take a little bit longer to find the right partner. And that makes sense because, again, you want to find the right partner. And again, depending upon what your industry is, that could take a longer period of time than traditional financing, where we have a program and it's called our LEAP loan. If you're an existing small business commercial client, so if we've done business in the past before, we can do a loan up to $100,000 in 72 hours or less. It's a one-page application, and it's done. To purchase equipment or vehicles, it has to be tangible equipment or collateral, but non-real estate, obviously, because appraisal, title, et cetera. But that is, a fundamental difference. So how does a commercial bank consider a loan request from a company with equity financing? It's question that I've received a couple times this morning. And honestly, it's the answer is the same way that we look at any credit request. We really look at the 5 C's of credit. And any lending book that you'll ever read will probably talk about the 5 C's of credit. As a young lender, when I started with the bank right out of college, this was what I was basically entrenched in. And I will say I really slant heavily to the lending side. It's something that I really enjoy. I enjoy being with businesses and watching them grow and helping them and financing their needs and seeing them grow and flourish. For me is very rewarding personally. But we also have fundamentals, and we do have things that we have to look at from a regulatory aspect, not just a regulatory aspect, but also from a fiduciary responsibility. I would never want to make a loan to somebody that I can't prove on paper that they can afford. That's the worst thing that a lender could ever do. So that's why we really default to these 5 C's of credit. The first being character, and so character is important. Character, I will tell you, BB&T is a character-driven organization. So we do look at credit. We do look at your willingness to repay. That is really a good definition of character. We also look at capacity. There's a reason why these two are on the slide together, because these are really paramount. The capacity is your ability to repay. And that's looked at, and we have a debt service coverage ratio, which is essentially your available cash flow, or EBITDA, so your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, divided by your annual debt service, gives you your debt service coverage ratio. And so that is what we as bankers look at in determining the viability of a loan request, to make sure that it quote-unquote cash flows. And that's important, because if the business does not cash flow, then we could be doing a disservice to that client. There could be a better option. Restructuring debt, there's a lot of different things that we could look at. But frequently in a startup, right, this doesn't exist, right, because you're just starting up. And that's where equity financing really can help. The bank can also help. And that really comes in the way of being prepared in preparing a business plan. We also utilize, obviously, the SBA and their assistance so that we can help lend to an organization that maybe isn't able to show that they can service that debt yet, but they can show us they have a really good plan in place. And that's where having proper counsel and CPA and business advisors around you can really make the difference, and it can really make or break a credit request, and often does. So next in the 5 C's of credit is capital. Essentially, that's the client's skin in the game, so to speak, so the amount of money or contribution or investment that a borrower has put into the respective business. So the amount of personal funds, how vested are they? What do they have into it? If it's a mature business or a growth phase business where they've reached the break-even point, so to speak, so which is considered quote-unquote bankable in terms of lending, that looks like their deposit account, their liquidity. Collateral, what business assets are available, equipment, so commercial property, maybe personal assets. While this is always nice, at the end of the day, the deal has to make sense. BB&T is not a collateral lender. And it's a conversation that I probably have 5 times a week at minimum. Just because a property is owned free and clear and let's say it's worth $1 million and you want to borrow $200,000, that's very attractive. But we need to make sure, and what we're looking for is that you have the capacity to repay that debt, regardless of what that collateral is worth. Collateral is nice, don't get me wrong. We want collateral, right? But it is really important that you have the capacity to repay that debt. Finally, condition. Conditions really speak to industry concentrations, operation management, purpose of the loan request. It's kind of all-encompassing, it's kind of a catch-all, so to speak. And the conditions are important, specifically in regards to industries, and certain industries have higher risk tolerances than others. Some have very low default rates, some are very high. And that is a reality, and that is something that is taken into consideration in the underwriting of a credit request. Every industry is different, and every industry has different types of operating cycle and how you're getting paid and how you're repaying your vendors, et cetera. So going back to the 5 C's of credit, just all in whole, and we touched on this a little bit, capacity and character are really the most critical. So without sufficient cash flow to repay your debt, we don't have a deal. It's just as simple as that. So we have to be able to see that. So that lends to, is your company profitable? Right? Lou said there's a big difference between cash flowing and being profitable. Do your financial statements accurately reflect this? Are you doing your own financial statements? I hope not. I hope that you have a professional that is preparing your financial statements, whether it be a bookkeeper, a CPA, a controller. That's very important, accurate reporting of financial data, because those are things that we look at as bankers, especially if you're a newer company and you've been around for maybe 1 or you've just hit 2 years. 2 years is kind of the magic number in the banking industry. If you've been in operation and you've been in business for 2 years, that's really the magic number that we look at. And so those financial statements, so your income statement and your balance sheet, are really what we're looking at. So we would be looking at your 2018, obviously, because taxes have not been filed yet, and prior year 2017, to see how you've grown, right? So your financial statement should accurately reflect this. Okay. So perspective from a commercial bank in regards to how equity financing plays a role in the 5 C's of credit. Equity financing can provide additional liquidity or cash flow to a prospective loan request. So if you do have an outside investor who is a party to your business, who has taken on some equity financing, that can provide additional liquidity and really strengthen up a credit request. It can also make a lender feel more comfortable that your business has industry knowledge and that you have an active investor who is actively engaged in helping you grow your business. This is really, again, fundamental to what we look at in underwriting and reviewing a credit request. That investor also may have additional collateral that they may be able to pledge in conjunction with the credit request, should it be necessary. So some key benchmarks that we look at when it comes to doing business and specifically lending to a company that has equity financing, we're generally looking at, in any credit request, that 80% of the ownership, so of the total ownership of your company, is personally guaranteeing the loan. That's pretty much the magic number with most commercial banks. We're generally looking at 80%. In addition, and Lou had touched on this earlier as well, any owners with 20% or more equity in the company are normally required to personally guarantee the request. And again, the reason for this is because if you believe in the company, right, then we want to see that, and that's in the form of a personal guarantee. That makes the bank feel more comfortable and overall gets us across the finish line. Additionally, personal and institutional strength of the equity investors can be considered as mitigation for risk in a credit request. I would say that this plays sometimes when personal guarantees are not in play. And there may be various reasons why a personal guarantee may not be suitable. And if the business and the company and the financial reporting supports that strength, we may be able to bend on that. But again, that's where an equity investor could mitigate that. It's important to note that every deal is different. No two deals are alike. So we always are looking at really understanding your business. So as a small business specialist, my job is to understand your business, really understand how you operate, your operating cycle, how you do business, how you make money. Look at your accounts receivable, look at your payables. We look at things and can we help you in other ways? Can we help improve those turn times? Are there certain products or services that we could offer that could help improve those and thus improve your cash flow? We look at things like that. We also look at your deposit strategy. Does that make sense? Are you sitting with a ton of money in a non-interest bearing checking account when you could be investing it or putting it in something safe or a rainy day, but at least earning something? As opposed to 0.00 in a business interest checking, regular business checking account. So those are the day-to-day things that we look at. We also want to know about you personally. Frequently, the most common thread with any business owner that I find is that they don't think about themselves. It's always the business first. So we talk about succession planning, exit strategy. We talk about insurance, things like that. Have you planned for the future? What are your plans for the future? What is the exit strategy? Do you have a buy-sell? If you have a partner, is that buy-sell funded? Those are all things to think about. And if you haven't thought about them, if you do have a partner, I strongly encourage you to consider that, and certainly you can have a conversation offline. So, to really sum this up, if I've said anything, I probably said it 5 times. So get professional help. So with your business financing questions. Deciding how to finance your business is about as serious a thing as that you'll ever do with your company. And choosing equity or debt financing can make or break you. It really is a choice, and you should engage professionals. And so you should be consulting your CPA, your business accountant, your business lawyer, and your banker to fully understand your needs. It's very important and oftentimes overlooked because, again, as an entrepreneur, you're going, right? So, but again, you want to stop and seek counsel so that you're making the right decisions. there is a thing as a business growing too fast, and we do see that frequently. You want to make sure that you are properly structured so that you can scale your company. And you want to make sure that you have things in place and benchmarks in place to make sure that you get where you want to go. So in conclusion, I appreciate the time to speak in front of you folks today. I appreciate you guys coming out and giving us the opportunity just to talk about just debt and equity financing in general. And I'll be happy to take any of your questions. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you covered this already without stopping but as a business coach and consultant, I have clients coming to me talking about business credit and how to create it. Can you comment?
Absolutely. So business credit, really, so there is such a thing as business credit, and it is important. In establishing business credit, can be done in a variety of ways. Small at first, such as a vehicle or a credit card in the business name, which establishes a consistent repayment so that a bank or a banker can see that you're repaying those bills on time. That goes hand in hand with personal credit, but business credit is differentiated in that it's truly in the business's name. When a loan is done through BB&T, so when I do a loan for a client, it does not report on their personal credit report. It reports in other places, so in a DNB or an SBFE report, which is a small business Equifax report. And those are things that we look at to make sure that those debts are being repaid in a timely fashion. Because again, it goes back to that capacity to repay. And really that's what it comes down to, right? The ability, right? The willingness to repay. Yes, sir. Oh.
The cash flow being the basis for the loan, can you just touch on a lot of early stage companies especially may not have the cash flow to justify the loan, but say, for example, you have a restaurant owner who wants to open up a second location, and they can say, well, based on the current cash flow, if we open up a second location, we'll have this much cash flow and we will be able to afford the loan. There's that gray area that I've always been a little bit curious about.
Sure.
So, can you explain that a bit?
Absolutely. So history is really important, and again, every industry is different. I recently had a dentist who had an existing location for 15 years, had hired a business consultant to grow his company. He had been maintaining the same amount of sales for 13 years. In the last 2 years, he had hired on this business consultant, is growing like gangbusters, 30% year over year, really, really, really strong. So he reached the point where he wanted to open a second location. And while we have we had projections, I should say, we had a detailed business plan. So that business partner that he had engaged, that marketing specialist, he brought together a team to put together projections for the next 3 to 5 years and what that looks like. And again, every industry is different. A restaurant is a little bit more risky in that it can be subject to trends in food and location. And so it really depends on the industry. But generally speaking, we look at, so if you have an existing business plan, and if you are successful in that business plan and you're opening a second location, we can really look at your existing profitability and say, well, can that profitability sustain the build while you're building that second location? Can you service that debt? If you can, and it's reasonable to expect that you will, also supplemented with your projections and a careful business plan, the bank certainly can feel comfortable with that. Frequently, we do engage the SBA when it comes to deals like that. but in many cases, we don't need to. We feel strong in that the borrower has both the ability and the willingness to repay the debt. And again, the debt obligation has to make sense. And that means proper terms. So if you're buying a vehicle, right, you wouldn't want to finance a vehicle over 10 years, right? Because after 5 or 6 years, that vehicle, it's not worth anywhere near what you paid for it. It's not worth anywhere near what you paid for it the day you drive it off the lot, right? So you would want to structure that in a 5, maybe 6, depending if it's a really expensive vehicle, maybe 6 years to lower the payment a little bit. But that is something that you do want to consider. And that's something that, as a financial advisor and as a banker, that is advice that is given as well to clients, because it's very important to think about structure and term. Equally important is the difference between variable or short-term debt and long-term debt. In our prior series, we did speak about long-term debt, and short-term debt is intended to be paid within a year. It's typically a higher rate. It's based on a variable interest rate, while long-term debt is normally pegged to a fixed rate and intended to be paid over a longer period of time. Think real estate, right? So your home, 15, 20 years, maybe 30. And commercial, normally 15 to 20 is top of the mark. So a very good question. Yes, ma'am.
Just curious to know how you would look at the credit when the credit is not necessarily reported to an organization. So in my industry, I lease vehicles from 2 different organizations. I buy a lot of fuel and transportation. So I know that none of those companies are reporting to Equifax or any of those places, but I've been doing that for 10 years.
Mhm.
So would you take that into consideration for organizations that I have relationships with?
Absolutely.
That would- okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would be surprised what is and isn't reported. I would venture a guess to say they very well could report, and you just may not know it. We normally see vendor trade lines on a D&B or SBFE report all the time, frequently 10 to 20. It's pretty normal. I've seen the smallest of things on all sorts of clients, from a business lease to a vendor, Napa Auto Parts, something like that, where they're buying tools for maybe $200, and we see those types of things reported. But we could talk with that vendor or receive, if we have something that we can tangibly see that obligations are being repaid, that can certainly play into the credit request. Certainly, we would default to other factors as well, such as history, so how long you've been in business, profitability of the company, the ability to service debt. So fuel industry is very cash intensive, so low margins. So normally you got to do a lot of volume to make a little. That's tough industry. But it's certainly something that, again, it just depends on the other circumstances. But to your point, so yes, those individual trade lines do matter. Yes, sir.
Throughout your presentation, you indicated personal guarantee.
Mhm.
Many people who start business have taken much of their resources and put it into business. How do you factor in personal guarantee? And really talk a little bit more about the personal guarantee and its value to the equation of approving a loan.
Sure. So, in short, a personal guarantee is essentially a promise that should the business go under, or should the business not be able to pay this debt back, that you, as the business owner, will personally guarantee that that debt will be repaid back to the bank. In equity financing situations, that can be tricky. I currently have a deal where there's 20 investors that are involved, and we're having to get very creative in how we underwrite that structure because of the complexity of the buy-in, so to speak, of the business. With that said, In that particular instance, we actually only have 2 guarantees instead of all 20. And the reason why they are the primaries, so to speak, who are running that business and who believe in that business. It's their vision. Really, they're the drivers. And at the end of the day, that's really what speaks to it. Again, a personal guarantee is not the end-all, be-all. There are definitely situations where maybe, say, a real estate secured request, and go back to the property's worth $1 million and you're looking for $200,000, right? And let's say that business has been around for 5 or 10 years, they're very strong. Can we drop the personal guarantees? You bet. Yeah, that's certainly something that could be possible. It's not the everyday, it's not the norm, especially in small commercial, which is generally defined as 1 to 5 million in annual sales. That's normally the small business segment, so to speak, so $1 to $5 million in annual revenues.
I just want to I wanted to co-sign on what you said, but also wanted to further that up with a comment, because that's a huge moot point, personal guarantee situation. But if you're not standing behind your business, remember, banks we like little risk, right? Or we want our money back. We have, people that we've got to, shareholders that we have to answer to. So if you're not standing behind your business, that also sends a message to us as bankers that if you're not willing and you think you want to walk away, why would you want us to put 80, 90% of your transactional costs in your business when you're not even standing behind it? So keep that in mind as well, especially as you're growing. When you can start asking for personal guarantees to be done is when you'll be in what we call segment primarily called middle market, which you can have a limited guarantee. When you have partners, 4 partners, you can limit it's $1 million, you can limit your guarantee to 25% or whatever you negotiate with the bank. But until you get over 5 million, I would say closer to 15 to 20 million in sales, it's hard to request that the bank do something without a guarantee. It's nearly impossible. And as soon as we start hearing that, we start thinking of other ways to secure the loan, like maybe can we get a CD? Can we get another property? We're trying to figure out a way why you want to get out of this, because we need you to be stuck in it. We need, if your home is attached to the loan, you'll work harder at your business to make sure you don't lose your home.
Personal guarantee isn't a direct deed of trust or lien against your primary residence or home. I mean, it's implied, but really, there is definitely a difference in taking that hard collateral and putting a lien against that property. So I will say, if the deal is strong, so in other words, to your point, the cash flow is there, the deal makes sense, the purpose is there, the collateral is there, and the deal is very strong, we can do carve-out guarantees, which essentially are protections against fraud or things like that, very simple things that basically state, as long as you don't do these bad things, we're okay with the loan. And we have definitely in small commercial done those particular carve-out guarantees. Any other questions? All right, guys. It was my pleasure to speak today, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate that. Great questions. And now there comes a point in the program where we're going to ask some entrepreneurs who we've had experience with to come down and share their experience. I think did see Willie Vereen in the audience. Is Mike Miller here? Mike's not here. Oh, yes, he is. Mike Miller is here. Mike, why don't you come on up? And Khalid Smith. Okay, great. Come on down. These are 3 companies that we've worked with over the years, and I'd like for them to just share their experiences in terms of working with us, the kind of financing that we've been involved with them, and their experiences. They could share their experiences with you all and how they started out, how they developed their businesses, and they got to a certain point where they came to us and how we were able to work with them. And I think Willie also has a very, very interesting story. So why don't we start out with you, Willie.
Willie Vereen. Can everybody hear me okay? Willie Vereen, Mid-Atlantic Broadband. We are a voice, video, and internet provider to a number of DOT contractors within the U.S. and also own and operate small cable TV companies in rural markets in Missouri and California. Do you want me to?
No.
Oh, perfect. I've got some notes. When you start getting old, you got to get out some notes. Actually, my comments are pretty brief. I've had a chance to sit in on some of the workshops, and it's actually pretty quality information that people are giving you based upon my experience. For us, we've used debt and equity financing to do both acquisitions and expand our existing business. In fact, back in January 2000, when we purchased Mid-Atlantic Broadband, we used a combination of senior debt and sub-debt. Senior debt in the form of BB&T provided us a senior loan. Sub-debt was used, it was kind of creative actually. We used the original owner of Mid-Atlantic Broadband, provided the owner financing, and we were able to get him to do a subordination to the bank. So without even really knowing it, we used the combination of senior debt and sub-debt, which was pretty creative. Another pivotal point for us was in 2000. We did an acquisition of about $3 million, and we purchased a company that had a really attractive contract with the U.S. Air Force. In that particular instance, we used senior debt, and we also used sub-debt again, and that's when we got introduced to M&G. And there was an equity component to the sub-debt in that, in the form of warrants over a period of time, so that was pretty creative as well. As we're looking at this and we're going through this discussion, some of the advice that I can give you is that, and you heard it earlier as well, what's your end game? What's your exit strategy? And one of the reasons that that's important is, as an entrepreneur, are you building this business to be a legacy business that you're going to move on to a family member or a loved one? Or are you building this business to exit at some point? And that's a really important question because that's going to impact the type of financing you pursue going forward. They wanted me to talk about my experience with MMG. It's actually coming up on 15 years. We have had the opportunity to use a number of vehicles within the MMG portfolio, everything from sub-debt to they've guaranteed loans for us. They've done equity within our company. And one of the things that's even more important is they've been incredible from the perspective of providing advice over the years. The level of integrity, and to give you a plug here, the level of integrity we found has been incredible because when we first started with them, we were pretty naive as to how the game worked. And we were actually in a position where we could have been taken advantage of, and they did not do that, which was a huge plus. In fact, they educated us over a period of time, and we've gotten pretty decent at it. So that's largely my story. Comments are pretty brief. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Mike?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Miller. My company is Ogos Energy, LLC. We're based in Anne Arundel County. We started the company 4 years ago. We are in the energy development business, and before starting the company, I was 12 years with Washington Gas, utility, and before that in various real estate and corporate finance positions in corporate America. Let me start kind of with an icebreaker question. by a show of hands, if you are an entrepreneur and you're offered a term loan at 15% interest, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, you're offered a similar amount of equity investment, which one would you choose?
Great question.
By a show of hands, how many people would choose the equity? It depends. That's a good answer. That's a good answer. How many people think the equity would be cheaper? Yeah. So I guess the key when talking about equity is that, at least in theory and pretty much in practice, equity, common equity is always the most expensive capital that you can get. And I use the high interest rate example to make that point, which is that however high the interest rate is that someone's proposing to you, if you're dealing with a smart equity investor, the return that they're going to demand is going to be even higher because of the perceived risk. So, you know, one of the big issues with equity is really understanding how much are you paying. The nice thing about equity is that you can have one idea of the cost and your investor can have a totally different idea of the cost, because the true cost of equity is defined ultimately by how successful or unsuccessful your company is in the long run. So that's one of the key reasons that equity helps cement deals, is because it allows people to work together even though they may have different expectations of the future. Whereas with a loan, the cash flow projections and the debt coverage ratios have to be there. Everybody knows the consequences if you don't make those payments, and therefore there's very little room for misunderstanding. When we started off 4 years ago, we actually started off with a very big idea. And I guess for all entrepreneurs see their ideas as big ideas. Our big idea was to be the first African-American owned and only Maryland-based organization to gain control of an offshore wind energy lease, which was a new program being offered by the Federal Department of Interior, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. So we put together a business plan. We had a lot of reasons that we thought this was a smart thing to do. We wanted some first mover advantage, and all this was based on a law that was passed in Maryland that required that if anyone was going to do offshore wind, they had to have a strong minority business component. So we kind of developed a concept and took our idea on the road. And we had to start with raising private equity, because this was a very, very risky proposition. We didn't know if we could win the lease, and if we won the lease, there'd be all kinds of costs and uncertainties associated with actually developing an offshore wind project. So we had to get partners, we had to get investors. And so our first equity raise was really kind of a friends and family type situation, where we actually tried to get folks who didn't mind taking a risk to support us in something that would be very high risk and high reward. But the way we managed it was to let people know that a lot of the cost of what we wanted to do would only be incurred if we were successful. So we were able to raise a few $100,000 in hard cash equity, but we also were able to pencil up over $2 million in equity commitments, provided that we won the lease, and that money would be used to pay the cost of the lease that we bid on. Well, we actually got dramatically outbid for the lease, and the rest is history. So we didn't get that deal. We were able to bid high enough to get just about any lease that's been sold in the last 4 years in offshore wind, but we had to misfortune or good fortune to be in Maryland, where the successful price was like literally 4 times what it was in any other state auction. So after that, we really had to figure out, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to fold our tent, or are we going to build something off of this great start? We had put together a really phenomenal team. There was a lot of excitement. And in the process of not getting the lease, we had actually achieved a lot of successes. For example, there was an extensive qualifications process that anyone had to go through, and our company, even to this point, we're the only minority company that's ever qualified and got certified to do offshore wind in the country. So people believed in the team, and they wanted to see what else we could do. And what we ended up was to focus on continuing renewable energy, but at a much more manageable level. And so we do Maryland community solar now. So our target projects are basically solar systems that get built on about 10 to 15 acres, serve about 350 homes, and each project costs about $4 million to construct. We have a pipeline of about 12 deals that are in various stages of planning and development across the state. So MMG has been really flexible in dealing with us. They gave us, they invested in our first initiative, and just like the other investors, we had to give them back a large portion of the money when we couldn't use it to pay for the lease. It took us a year, or maybe 18 months, to develop a new business plan that we really could believe in based around solar. And so about 2 years ago, we went back to MMG with the revised business plan. The economics of building a solar farm are not different from the economics of doing offshore wind. It's just that an offshore wind farm costs $5 billion and a community solar project costs $5 million. So we presented the plan. We didn't need to raise more private equity, but we were able to get MMG to continue to support us from an operational standpoint to pursue these projects. Well, one of the unique things about renewable energy, and I guess it's similar to real estate development, is that everything is done on project finance. So we haven't come to MMG to actually fund our solar farms per se. We've come to MMG to help fund our internal operations while we do this development work. The actual equity and funding for the projects comes from tax equity and comes from securitized finance against the assets of the individual solar projects. So I'll wrap up by saying that one of the keys for us, and I heard the tail end of a discussion about lending, because we really did come in with a very risky proposition, we relied heavily on some of the other legs of the stool. The most significant one is collateral. As a CEO, I was fortunate enough to have enough collateral to support the level of financing that we're requesting. So I did sign away my children's birthright. So the risk that MMG has taken really has to do with collateral and character. I think they do believe in the business, but they also know that they're not actually going to get my house and my other assets. So whatever it takes, I'm going to, pay back the loans that we have, and then they have warrants from an equity perspective, so that to the extent we are successful, they have X% of the company to the extent that we're successful.
Where's the revenue, Mike?
The revenue, yeah. I thought I was gonna get away without saying that. Yeah, we are a very lumpy business. So we live on development fees. So for example, if we successfully build a single solar project for $4.5 million, then, you know, our development fee would be in the high six figures.
Okay.
And that would be paid during the pre-construction period. So by the time the solar site is built, we would have received our development fee. It would be capitalized in the permanent financing, and then we go on to the next project.
Okay.
So we are a real feast and famine type business. And we actually have an arrangement with MMG so that each time we exit a single project, they get a certain amount of the gross revenue to service their financing, and then we have the rest to reinvest in the building or business or pay off our, our other limited partners, et cetera.
Fascinating model.
So you can see there's different structures that can work when you have a patient capital, equity capital. Again, given the industry that Mike was in, we wanted to structure something that fit his particular situation. Simultaneously, because of the risk associated with it, we wanted to have some collateral as well. So we saw that as a win-win. Khalid?
Sure. So good morning, everybody. My name is Khalid Smith. I'm the co-founder and chief product officer of LessonCast Learning. We sell to school districts and to teachers' colleges, and we make software that helps teachers show their increasing effectiveness in teaching. We incorporated in 2012. So our journey as a company was one where we started as a service provider and then began to develop a technology to be able to scale that because we quickly sort of met capacity. And then we're in a pretty difficult industry, so you would imagine that one of the things that equity folks don't like is to hear that you either sell to schools or to the government, as it's a challenging environment. There's a lot of regulation, concerns, political turmoil, et cetera. And so we always had a conversation about whether the equity model fit our particular industry and our particular goals that we were working on. We were fortunate enough to, within the first break-even point, and then around 2016 or so, we were cruising along, and then we were having conversations about, well, what kind of business are we? Are we a family business? Are we a small business? Do we see this as a big idea that can change education, et cetera, within Maryland, within the United States, within our Mid-Atlantic region, et cetera? And that coupled with, was the time right? So what did the regulatory environment look like? Were we seeing enough traction in our business, et cetera? The theme that I heard earlier this morning throughout was relationships. And through that, I think that because of our slow growth model, we had the opportunity to build lots of relationships. So both in the industry as well as with other supporters. So we were a recipient of the Maryland Boost Fund for small emerging businesses, and that helped us do some acquisitions back in 2014, 2015. We've been in the Towson Incubator for some time. They've been instrumental in helping us with advice. We went through an accelerator program, Dream It, where we really had 4 or 5 months to really polish our pitch, to go and do tours in Silicon Valley, New York, Vancouver, Chicago, et cetera, in the investment community. So the education investment community and those with a particular risk tolerance for what it is that we do and a domain expertise are pretty small. So there is a lot of traveling and legwork in finding what that might necessarily look like, and it was difficult from several standpoints. Being a minority entrepreneur, being a business that doesn't look like the next billion-dollar business, et cetera, offered several challenges for us. So Into that mix, our relationship with MMG is relatively new, so we went into an equity financing round with them that closed this past May. It was instrumental in helping us with a strategy of a white label sort of back-end strategy. So we were doing a lot of the upfront work with selling our software was also very consulting intensive. And what we began to do was to sell to some of the other consultants who were also doing the work that we were doing, showing them that they could both show the evidence of what they were doing, as well as realize a secondary revenue stream, where generally they would do some $5,000 to $10,000 engagement with a school for a month or 2 months, and then they would leave, and hopefully the next year they would get that contract back, where our software allows them to have an ongoing relationship for more of a subscription fee, et cetera, but allows them to coach on a regular basis. And so that new revenue stream required us to back away from our existing revenue stream, which was really taking up a lot of our time from a consulting standpoint, but has allowed us to scale. And so we're in the midst of executing that scale. And MMG was great in terms of being creative with the financing. So understanding that here was our revenue streams, here was our opportunities, here were our projections, here we had a year's worth of performance that we could necessarily look at, but we were doing something that was relatively new and had some risk associated with it. And I think my homes had already been taken in some previous relationships, so we didn't have to sign away my children's birthrights and such. But that had already been done. And so they were like, well, given that that's not available, what else can we do that necessarily makes some sense? So seriously, very hard decision, and one that we will all come up against, but you having to believe in yourself is the first step before you would ask somebody else to place their money into your enterprise. So have a wonderful relationship with BB&T. My branch manager has done some magic in terms of making funds available same day that were required, and gotten us out of several different quagmires. So those relationships are tantamount to one's success, and really happy with our early goings, and happy to speak more if you guys have questions.
Okay, you can see the diversification here, and we really kind of look at this from where we perspective. We said, folks are asking, what kind of, you have deep domain in certain industries, and some we do, but typically what we wanted to do is to have what we call a diversified opportunistic opportunities that we want to go after. You can see there are 3 different industries, if you will, but we really saw that these entrepreneurs were great entrepreneurs, but also looking at different industries that were growing quite a bit. And so we got and developed a strong relationship with them. Willie, you said 15 years. I didn't realize it was 15 years. Where were you when, revenue-wise, when we started with you, and where are you now?
When we started, we were less than $1 million in revenue. The company at the time was a small regional ISP down in the Stafford, Virginia area. We were also based here in Baltimore. And now we're a little bit over $40 million in annual revenue. And our span is actually international. On the military side, we do a lot of support with bases in Korea, Germany, Turkey, and France. On the domestic side, we have operations in 34 states throughout the U.S. So we've grown quite a bit there.
So here's a situation. Remember I said earlier, you look at the entrepreneur and you bet on the entrepreneur. And we looked at Willie and we saw his experience, and particularly his ingenuity and his tenacity. And actually there was a situation where a company tried to, it was a private equity company, saw the value in Willie's company and basically tried to take the company from us. Okay, and they didn't accomplish that because BB&T stepped in and really helped helped us with that and helped everyone with that. So let us open up for questions. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned diversification. Are there industries that you shy away from?
Well, that's a great question. We aren't crazy about restaurants. However, we've done some. Not a lot of them, but we have done some. And a lot for us, we look at the entrepreneur, okay, and just how much experience he or she may have in that industry. And also, entrepreneurs are interesting. They may take a hit, but they come back. And so when we run across people that have had some challenges, but they're still out there fighting, and they have a plan and whatnot, then we're willing to take a look at them. Biotech, that's right. Yes.
Something Mike said, something that I thought I'd bring up. As far as an equity investment, hypothetically, if you were to say, I don't know, invest with this general number, $1 million, and you have whatever your timeline would be for where you might have your own exit in, say, 3 to 5 years, or whatever. But Mike had mentioned taking some cash or gross profit to service the loan. Can you explain that a bit, what that was?
Sure. The way we structured things was as term debt with substantial warrants. So we didn't structure it as a straight equity infusion or preferred equity infusion. So our particular equity investment at this point is primarily in the form of debt with warrants attached. So I was referring to the debt service piece, separate and apart from MMG's decision to eventually exercise their warrants. Yeah.
So again, structuring something, the industry that he is in, structuring something that made sense for him as well as for us, that we are comfortable with and he's comfortable with. So we want him to focus on that business. And also, we had Collateral as well, so we knew he was going to make this work.
And let me just follow up and say that.
So they did a mixture of the debt equity deal.
Yes, and actually from a cost of funds standpoint,
Yeah.
it's really favorable for us.
Yes.
Because we're really having use of these funds really at a very reasonable debt rate.
Right.
And the real cost is only associated with without great success. So, if we have great success, we don't mind, sharing that. But if we don't have great success, then we would have both engaged in some long-term reasonable debt financing, and they'll get paid back either from the business or from the collateral, and that'll be the end of the story. So it's a nice alignment because we came in with, we're gonna do what, only companies 10 times our size could even do. And this allowed them to support us and conditionally believe in us without having to just kind of buy in totally. It's like, okay, if you're successful, you can hold the investment and we'll take an upside. If you're not successful, this just reverts back to straight debt, pay us our money back, and that's it. So it's very, very tailored.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so my question is for millennial. I appreciate that, I'm moisturized, but I think.
I think that was
76. So, as a consultant, I deal with a lot of millennials. Talk to me a little bit about your processes you went to everybody regarding your finances to get the loans or the capital that you need to actually. What was your first thought process?
Oh, Lord, okay. If I think I understand, just like kind of walk you through like where were our points of tension. There were several, right? So being in the tech entrepreneurship world, there's an accepted track of you build your software, you launch it, you go out, you get your first round of seed funding, you have 6 months to 12 to go into build up enough of a customer base where you've got a story for your Series A, et cetera. And our customer doesn't work like that. Like we're not a Dropbox or something that can show these customer growth rates of 100, 200% within a month. We have a customer that makes a decision about whether or not they're going to implement something in March of 2018 in order to implement you in 2020, and then they're not sure whether they're going to keep you until June of 2021 when they've gone through this. So our sales cycle, it didn't match that of the rest of tech entrepreneurship. So it required us to have a longer runway of learning for us to be able to tell the same story of customer acquisition, et cetera. And so a lot of our work was in translating when sitting in front of investors, et cetera, to say, okay, I know you're used to looking at this in terms of month-over-month growth rate, but here's how we look at our sales cycle, et cetera. So we really had to educate ourselves so that we knew up and down, here are our financials, here are the metrics, here are our key performance indicators that we were going to look at. And I tell everyone, I do a lot of coaching about tech entrepreneurs, like it was about us convincing ourselves that we had a story and this was making sense, and we were to the point where we were confident enough to be able to invest in ourselves, and that's what turned other people to say, okay, we really believe that they have something here. But it was a 4 to 5 year journey, where in other areas, aspects of tech entrepreneurship, it is like 6 months to a year, right? And so we were looked at as being really long in the tooth. And your business has been around for 3.5 years and it hasn't caught on yet. It must not be that great of an opportunity. So there was a lot of battling that sort of stigma necessarily to it. But I've seen several other folks within our industry either get funding and then crash and burn, or we actually even bought one. So one of our friends who got funding along the same time got $2 million worth of funding and went and spent it, and ended up in an opportunity where we were actually doing a financing round. I mentioned the boost loan that we got, and actually purchased their assets.
We have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to try to accomplish 2 things in this discussion. One, let's see. Just to talk a little bit about MMG and what we do. A little about talk about the life cycle of a business and how we can assist during that life cycle. But specifically focus on the funds we have under management and the kind of resources we have available to invest or to lend. And then to talk about some of the investment structures. I mean, the 3 deals that were before you all had different investment structures. We participated in the financing in one form or another of each deal. And so we'll talk a little bit about possible investment structures. But last, and maybe more importantly, at the end, spend a little bit of time talking about something I don't think we've talked about yet, which is important, is the mechanics of pricing. Pricing your deal, valuing your company, and how you negotiate the type of interest that you retain or an investor will have in your company is very important. And I think entrepreneurs should have an understanding of the perspective that an investor will take and how an investor analyzes that. So we want to share with you a little bit of that formula. So MMG, the information on our company is available to you
out in the hallway. Hopefully, all of you have picked up your information. But we've been in existence since 1995, and we have several funds under management. We have a real experienced team of individuals, over 125 years of collective experience between us in making investments in loans of various forms to small, minority, and women-owned businesses here in the state of Maryland. One of the funds that we have under management is called the Maryland Small Business Development Financing Authority. That's a program that is operated in the state of Maryland through the Department of Commerce. We have a contract to manage that program and have had that contract to manage that program with the state since 1995. And prior to that, the program had been around and evolved over a period of time since the 1980s. And my partners, particularly Stanley Tucker, Tim Smoot, and Randy Croxton, were essential in operating the program for the state and helping to develop the different components, which I'll talk about. We also have another fund under management called the Maryland Casino Business Investment Fund, but it's a part of what you may have heard of as the Video Lottery Terminal Fund, which is monies that's generated from the annual revenue of the slot machines. But in terms of the investment cycle, you can see that there are different stages that a business goes through. And the significance for us at MMG is that we can assist along most of these stages in some form of financing. The development seed stage, we can use to provide some form of assistance. We're really starting at the startup stage. The development seed stage, we can provide advice. We usually refer you to others who provide capital at the seed stage. But at the startup stage, under certain circumstances, we can assist the business. At the growth stage, we can also and have provided funding to assist businesses in various forms, and at the expansion stage and at the mature stage. So we can participate and have participated with businesses in each of these stages. I won't spend a lot of time talking about the stages, but if you'd like a copy of this or any other slides that we have, we can email them to you. But on the Ms. Biffa program, we started off with Ms. Biffa by providing contract financing that was developed in 1978. That was the first program that was developed. And over the years, it has evolved. Initially, we could only do small lines of credits, which were $150,000. We can now go up to $2 million in various forms of lines of credits and mobilization funding associated with that. So when companies have contracts that they need financing assistance to support, we have a program that's designed to assist, specifically if you have government contracts, and provide the lines of credits to support those contracts, to provide the working capital needs related to the contracts, as well as mobilization to get you started on some of those contracts. Later in 1983, we enacted through the state the Loan Guarantee Program, which operates similar to the SBA Loan Guarantee Program. And essentially, this can support businesses who are talking with banks, but they lack, the collateral support or the credit support that's needed to get a direct loan. We can make a bank more comfortable with doing the loan by providing up to an 80% loan guarantee to help support that particular loan and that business. The next one is surety bonding. In 1985, we had talked about the difficulties with businesses getting bonding. And I'm sure a lot of you know that bonding is required for certain contracts, particularly in excess of $250,000. Minority companies, small businesses, women-owned businesses were having difficulty getting bonding, still do to this day. And initially, a program was established to provide bonding guarantees. When that didn't work, we were able to convince the state to allow
a program where the state would provide direct bonding, and MMG has been managing that bonding program ever since. We can do direct bonds to support contracts up to $2 million. And then finally, the Equity Participation Investment Program was established in 1986 as well. It started off in phases. The initial phase was to provide investment in companies that were part of franchises. The second phase was to provide investment in businesses that were acquiring other businesses, acquisitions. The third phase was to provide investments in companies that were doing technology, and then ultimately we open it up so that we can do investments or subordinated debts or flexible forms of financing, either direct loans or lines of credits on commercial projects, or subordinated debt or equity type investments in any type of business other than a real estate project. And this program has been one of our most active programs over the years. It's given us a great deal of flexibility. And the good thing about all of these programs is that they complement one another. We can do a loan guarantee along with a line of credit, along with a direct investment. And we have done that. In the case of Mid-Atlantic Broadband, when Willie Vereen was talking about his deals, we used a combination of tools. We provided a loan guarantee to BB&T to get them comfortable with an existing loan that they had, and also provided a loan guarantee to get them comfortable with a new loan they were going to provide to the company. In addition to that, we provided a subordinated debt. It was a direct term loan investment, but was subordinated to the bank's loan, and it had deferred payments associated with it, but with higher interest rates for the risk that were associated with that type of capital. In addition, we were able to take warrants for equity upside in that deal, which were attached to the subordinated debt, but also attached to the loan guarantees we were providing, because we were taking risk in both transactions. So we were using these different tools interchangeably. We also have the Maryland Casino Business Investment Fund, which is revenue that 1.5% of all slot machines revenue is set aside into a fund to support small and minority women-owned businesses. MMG is one of 8 managers that manages that fund for the state of Maryland, and with that fund, we can also do investments in loans, or really loans in businesses. And we use these programs interchangeably. So in a nutshell, through the various sources that we have under management, including some venture capital funds that we have managed over the years. When we privatized in 1995, we were able to raise capital to support a venture capital fund, one which was a for-profit fund called MMG Ventures, and another which was a nonprofit fund called Community Development Ventures. And we were able to invest in various types of small minority women-owned businesses here in the state of Maryland. So we can provide debt financing, we can provide bonding, and we can provide equity. And so I will talk a little bit more about the equity side of this equation, but once again, we're very flexible, and we can use these tools and resources interchangeably. Hence, we can do lines of credits, we can do term loans, we can do letters of credits, we can do bid payments and performance bonds, equity investments, and for subordinated debt with equity features. Okay. Some of the investment structures that we have used over time is senior debt, direct loans. We've done subordinated debt, subordinate to other senior debt. We've done various forms of equity investments, preferred stock, which is what we have in Lessons Cast. We have provided loan guarantees, and we've done a combination of the above. In determining what these structures will look like, we look at what the purpose of the investment or loan is, what the repayment source is, and of course, the inherent risk associated with this. One of the important things to mention about, particularly Ms. Bitfa, is that this program was set up to assist businesses who can't normally obtain capital from traditional sources. If you go to BB&T, they tell you no, or if you go to an investor, they tell you no, well, then you can come to the Ms. Bitfa program and we can attempt to assist in that category. Or if they tell you that, well, we need some additional form of capital or we need a form of guarantee, then that's when we can assist the business. But of course, that means we're in the business of taking greater risk. We also look at what the collateral position is. Sometimes there's no collateral position. Sometimes there's a great opportunity for collateral support. So we factor all of that in. What the existing financing or commitments are in a particular deal, the ongoing need for cash in the future, what the potential upside of a deal is, and for us, of course, job creation, what the impact that this business will have here in the state of Maryland, because these are Maryland programs. And so we look at the economic impact, the job impact on the state. All of that factors into how we will structure a deal, how patient we will be. And when we talk about equity or subordinated debt, we're really talking about what we call patient capital. Capital that's not going to get repaid anytime soon, that may require deferred interest payments for a while, deferred principal payments for a while, or no payments. But we want to have an exit realization. We want to take into consideration the cost associated with our risk. Okay. So one of the things that when people come to us seeking what we call patient capital or equity type investments is what is the cost of this capital going to mean to their company, and what type of equity interest are we going to take in their company? And that deals with how we will value your company or how you value your company, how we will price the cost of the money. And in looking at that, we have to look at, one, what the projected returns are for this potential investment in your business. What are you saying the return will be and why? What does the industry indicators support in terms of potential return on investments? Are the price earning ratios? What are the price earning ratios for your particular industry, and how does that play into your particular business plan? We look at your projections for profit and loss, and your growth over the horizon, and how realistic that may be. You present to us your analysis. We're probably going to do our own analysis and come up with something that we believe between what you're projecting and what we're projecting are different scenarios of potential return opportunities. What is it on the aggressive side, which is usually your analysis? What is it on the conservative side, which is usually our analysis? And what about somewhere in between? So we look at different scenarios. And then we have to estimate what the fair market value is of your company now and in the future. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. How do you get to that estimate of fair market value? We determine the amount of investment that's needed. Your request may be for $1 million, but we may look at it and say, well, you only need $500,000. So what is the real need? What do your cash flows show? How much do you need the first year? What do you need the second year? And what are the potential sources for that funding? And what percentage ownership, the key question, is required for the investor in order to realize the return that we desire and the return that you promise. So those are all key factors and questions. In trying to get to an assessment of that, here is a basic template that I think is helpful for entrepreneurs to understand how, we tend to analyze it and look at it. The first question is, well, what is the investors, in this case MMG's, required return? You have to understand what your investors' objectives are. What are they looking to get? Do they want a 10% return? Do they want a 20% return over the life of the investment? Whatever it is, you have to understand that and factor that into your equation. In this case, we're going to assume that the desired return on an investment is 20%. What is the investment amount that's required? In this scenario, we're going to assume that the investment amount is $1 million. So what we're trying to get to here is, what is the future value of that proposed investment? And the formula for that is the present value times 1 plus R, which is the internal rate of return that's sought, to the nth power, which is the number of years to get to exit. If you look at that formula and you look at what's happening, what we're doing here is we're saying that to determine the present value, which is going to help us get to how we're going to price this deal, we're going to look at the rate of return, which is 20%, times the investment of $1 million that's being put into this. And the future value is going to equal the investment times the desired return over, let's say in this case, X number of years, 5 years. If you're promising to get back a return to us in 5 years, then that's the factors. And if you plug those numbers in, you'll see that the estimate of future value is about $2.4 million, and that's a function of putting $1 million in, getting back 20% over a 5-year period. Okay, so if we can safely conclude that the future value in 5 years is about $2.5 million for your company, then what kind of ownership do we need in your company in order to realize that return? The ownership required is equal to the future value of the investment divided by the fair market value of the company. So the fair market value of the company is an estimate of what the company can be sold for in future years, in the year 5. And that's a function of, usually a function of the price-earning ratios for your industry. It may be a multiple of revenue, it may be a multiple of EBITDA, but let's assume that in your industry, 2 times revenue is the formula, or 3 times revenue is the formula, or in your industry, 6 times EBITDA is the formula. Well, if 6 times EBITDA is the formula for determining future value, and you're projecting in year 5 that you're going to be at EBITDA of X amount, and 6 times is a reasonable multiple to use, then that's how we get to a certain value. And what we're concluding here is that using the multiples and the projected EBITDA, we can get to a $10 million valuation in year 5 for your company, based on projections that you and I have agreed to are reasonable. And if that's the case, and we need to get to a $2.5 million return on investment, then the ownership that's required in your company is going to be about 25% to get to that $2.5 million return. So I went through that real fast, I understand, but this is the thought process that we go through and that we expect you to be able to go to come to some reasonable assessment of, what's required for us, and what's required for you. And so I share that with you to give you kind of a sense of, the pricing analysis, which is a very valuable proposition that you need to factor into your request for funding, and understand how an investor may take a look at the potential returns back and the type of ownership interest they may need in your company or equity interest they may need in your company in order to realize a desired return. And we talked about MABB as an example of the flexible, the types of multiple structures that we can be creatively used to support a company. There are many other examples like what we did with Ogos Energy or what we did with Lessencast. They all vary depending upon the needs of a specific company. There is no pat solution, but our experiences give us multiple options that we can work with that we've seen work in the past. So that's, in summary, what we do, how we do it. I'll open it up for questions in it.
Questions? That too much for you?
Yeah, if anybody's interested in the slides, we can email them to you. Just make sure when you go downstairs, leave your name or an email address. Make sure we have it with the registrars at the registration desk, and we'll email you the slides. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, so I'm just trying to get a better understanding. When you speak of equity funding, are you all speaking of equity funding or?
Yes. Yeah, we're subject to the SEC regulations, yes. So we are a, what is it called, we're a qualified investor, accredited investor. Yes, sir.
What's the process to get an appointment or meeting?
Okay, well, we have an application process. And if you go online to our website, you can download the application. But if you want to request a meeting, you can contact any one of us. We can set up some time to talk with you. We like to see some information on your business beforehand and what it is you're trying to achieve. But it's very easy to set up a meeting and talk with us about it, even before you submit an application. Just probably email us something on your business, what your need is, and we can set a time to meet with you and discuss it. And any other individuals here as part of our team can assist you. That's it? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're just about on time. So thank you very much for attending, and this is our last workshop in dollars and cents for the year. We would.
Dan, I hate to interrupt.
All right.
But I want, we manage programs for the state of Maryland. I want to make sure we acknowledge the Department of Commerce and who our board chair, Les Hall.
Thank you. Les is,
By ourselves.
yeah, Les has been very instrumental in us over the years. I also would like to thank BB&T for working with us and actually underwriting these three workshops over the years. They've been a great partner and working with us on that and bringing this valuable information to entrepreneurs such as yourself. So hopefully we'll continue this over the years. And it's been great. Thank you for coming out and attending. And please come see us if you have a good idea. Oh yes, please fill out your evaluation forms. That's very important, and give us feedback in terms of what we did right and also how we can become better at doing that. So if there's anything else, Tim, Anthony, anything else?